Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gershwan, and you are watching One Mind Syndicate. Today we continue talking about Spacemarine chapters as we get into the Angel's Revenant, a very badass chapter that has a sad conclusion. But with that said, let's get into 40 facts on the Angel's Revenant. The Angel's Revenant is a loyalist Space Marine successor chapter of the Ultramarines. Their chapter name is a play on words, meaning angels of death, or angels that come from death. The chapter is well known for its long history of independent crusade operations, where resupply was uncertain. Thus the chapter relies on the strict orders of the Codex Astartes, and has developed a much bigger respect for its war gear. The chapter places a high value on restoring and repairing the war gear of its fallen, creating a close spiritual link between successive generations of the chapter's warriors. The chapter has even been able to maintain a venerated core of Mark IV maximum pattern relic power armor, dating back to the days of the Great Crusade and the Horus Heresy. The Battle Brothers of the Angel's Revenant are proud to wear the colors of their chapter, which is a dark cobalt blue with a pale white shoulder plate trimmed with gold, and in the center, the chapter badge, a white skull with no lower jaw, wreathed in a burning black flame. This chapter's origin can be traced back to the 8th founding, which was undertaken amid the dark times of the Nova Terra Interregnum, or the time of the Twin Empires, a time when the Imperium of Man fractured into warring factions after the rebellious Or Council of Nova Terra dismissed the authority of the High Lords of Terra and claimed separate rule over the Imperium's worlds in the Segmentum Pacificus in the galaxy's western reaches. The Angel's Revenant chapter was created with the intention of becoming a crusading chapter meant to destroy the lingering threats throughout the Segmentum Tempestus, and while they persecuted the Emperor's enemies in this sector, the religious rebellions on many worlds of the Segmentum Pacificus ultimately overthrew the Or Council and restored the rule of the High Lords, ending the time of the Twin Empires. Unfortunately, what followed was much worse. The increase in power of the ecclesiarchy helped bring about the Age of Apostasy, a second period of interstellar civil war that consumed the Imperium of Man. Luckily, the Angel's Revenant, much like many other Space Marine chapters, maintained their autonomy during this human conflict, and were able to continue their war against the archenemy. After the Age of Apostasy, the Segmentum Tempestus saw a resurgence in power and a renaissance of expansion, known to Imperial historians as the Rising Storm. With the blessing of Terra, the Segmentum authorities launched a number of crusades and campaigns to destroy lingering threats within their domain, and push back the fortified borders of the Imperium itself. The Angel's Revenant provided 4 companies of Astartes to take part in the most successful of these campaigns, known today as the Dark Marshes Crusade, which made enormous territorial gains, conquering or liberating more than 600 new worlds. These territorial gains warranted the creation of no less than 4 new imperial sectors. These were the Eurydice, Haxan, Orpheus, and Laiax sector. It would be in the Orpheus sector, many millennia later, when the entirety of the Angel's Revenant chapter would be called to reinforce the Arch-Confessor, Marduk of Helvamon, and his forces after he declared a war of faith for the souls of the Orpheus sector, claiming that the God Emperor himself had warned him of a great and terrible threat to all mankind. Thus began the Orpheus War of Faith, a bitter conflict that would last for nearly 20 standard years, and saw a full 1/5 of the Orpheus sector's population slain by its end, and countless more ruined, maimed, and displaced. Ultimately, the Imperial side won, thanks to the dedication of the Imperial forces, like the Angel's Revenant. The sector was rebuilt under its surviving Imperial commanders, and many regiments of the Imperial Guard and the survivors of St. Marduk's pilgrimage to the sector were allowed to settle its worlds, either laying down their arms or integrating fully into the local planetary defense forces. The minor colony world of Libethra, upon which St. Marduk had shown his favor, was converted over to a shrine world of the ecclesiarchy in honor of the saint, and it became a cemetery for the war's millions of glorious and blessed dead. Overlordship of the Shrine World was given over to the Angel's Revenant as their domain, which until that time they had been a fleet-based chapter. The Angel's Revenant also accepted the sacred charge of protecting Libethra's reliquaries, and the Space Marine's permanent resident on that world further strengthened the defense of the surrounding Orpheus sector. As stern supporters of the ecclesiarchy and the imperial creed, the bounty of the Orphean branch of the Adeptus Ministorum was given freely to the construction of the chapter's fortress monastery, while the hardy inhabitants of the pharaoh world of Patara formed the basis of a new generation of neophytes for the chapter. While completely autonomous of the Orpheus sector's imperial authority, the Angels Revenant serve as its protectors, guarding the pilgrimage routes of the Cold Vale, while their chapter starships ply tirelessly the borders of the Hesodon Nebula and the barren stars, hunting down and slaughtering xeno-corsairs and marauders that have long made their trackless region their lair. In the late 41st millennium, the violent warp turbulence that had held sway across the western division of the Orpheus sector for more than 3 centuries was rapidly and suddenly extinguished by a shockwave in the immaterium, leaving only the howling vortex warp rift remaining. All across the sector, astropaths, psychers, and witches were subjected to sudden and inexplicable deaths, or hopelessly mind-burned. Reports of mass hysteria, unexplained murders, disappearances, and mania increased exponentially across the worlds of the Cold Vale. The Ordo Malleus of the Inquisition's conclave Orpheus, based on the world of Apollyon, issued an order of maximum vigilance to all imperial authorities, believing that the warp disturbance and its attendant phenomena were but a precursor to a major incursion into the sector. Within a year, astropaths reeled against a tangled, overlapping cacophony of telepathic distress calls and echoings of psychic screams of the dying, distorted to near incomprehensibility and folded into overlapping time. Riding on the tides were far stranger calls, blazing pillars of energy spiked into the ether on the edge of the veiled region. Pulsing like beacons, these fountainheads of power spilled off howling gales of radiation and charged particle storms that seemed free to transcend the gulfs of distances between stars in mere moments. These flaring storms of energy danced like static discharge along warp routes and clung in ghostly cold fire to the hulls of starships. The seething electromagnetic contagion that brought with them whispers of unknown tongues that invaded Vox channels and supposedly sealed the secure communication webs, the fading echoes of agonizing scream following in their wake. With it, one phrase in Imperial Logothic repeated again and again: Minarch comes. Havoc followed wherever the malignant signal went, as machinery was plagued with sudden failure and malfunction. Servitors were driven mad, and cognitators were locked in terminal loops, their machine spirits shocked into stuttering messes. Yet at this time, the true nature of the threat remained unknown. Imperial authorities had no definite evidence as to the face of the enemy, which remained hidden. Perhaps most disquieting of all was the silence of Libethra, the chapter homeworld of the Angels Revenant, who had long served as the sector's stalwart defenders and most powerful of warriors. For Libethra also to be struck silent by this mysterious doom sent a splinter of cold panic into the hearts of the Orphean Imperial commanders, though they dared not acknowledge it. But it was this factor, more than any other, that threw them into a policy of panicked preparatory defense, rather than responding with blind counter-aggression as they might have. Of the final fate of the Angels Revenant Spacemarine chapter, little can be said for sure. Libethra, where 100 basilicas had been raised to honor the blessed dead, and where the Angels Revenant chapter had served as sentinels of an entire sector, was now a black sea of shifting ash, riven by red lava, all traces of the Imperium's hand obliterated. The scattered and fragmentary evidence that has been uncovered about their final hour suggests unsurprisingly that they fought to the last against the overwhelming force unleashed against them, as Libethra's system was found littered with radiational ghosts of deadly void combat and spreading clouds of micro-wreckages. The ancient hull of at least one of the vast Necron tomb ships that were later sighted over the world of Amaral during the Orphean War against the Necrons of the Minarch dynasty held fresh scars consistent with the unique signatures of Spacemarine bombardment cannons striking at extremely close range. It may be the case that the Angels Revenant's resistance was so much that the Necron invaders resorted to breaking through Libethra's crust and unleashing the planet's molten core to seal their fate conclusively. When news of the chapter's martyrdom reached the Ecclesiarchy Synod Tempestus, a segmentum-wide day of requiem was decreed. The bells of thousands of worlds across the segmentum Tempestus toiled to mark the passing of the Angels Revenant. It is now thought that no more than a few hundred Angels Revenants perhaps survived, and only those who were away from the chapter's homeworld on crusade when the Necron assault came upon Libethra. And those were 40 facts on the Angels Revenant. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to share it with your friends on Facebook or Reddit. It helps out the channel when you do so, and it helps us create more videos for you guys. This Space Marine chapter showcases the fact that even successor chapters have a long history of just campaigns and battles that they've been in. Even though the Angels Revenant are talked about because they faced the Necron dynasty and lost, the reality is that they fought since their creation, and they fought against chaos, they fought with the ecclesiarchy, they fought on a matter of different campaigns. So when you are creating your own Space Marine chapter, leave their past history vague, or at least keep a pocket where you can insert like more stories of them fighting or being on campaigns or crusades against other Xeno or any other threat from the Imperium, just because it makes for a better story, and it just gives you more room to actually throw in different campaign ideas and stuff like that. But again, if you guys have any suggestions for other topics of Warhammer 40k, please comment down below. I will try to make a Necron Dynasty lore video pretty soon on the Minarch Dynasty, which actually destroyed the Angels Revenant. Hopefully that comes out tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. And thanks for everything, guys. Don't forget we have a Patreon. A simple $1 a month helps us create more videos for you guys. If you can't support us on Patreon, we understand. Simply by liking, commenting, and sharing, it helps out the channel. But with that said, I'll talk to you tomorrow. This was Gershwin with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Always used to put my freedom first in any situation.